Sunday, November 10th, 2002 was a long day of waiting and watching for us in the Weather Center at ABC 3340. Early that morning, the Storm Prediction Center had placed much of north and central Alabama under a high risk of severe weather. The atmosphere that day was simply a powder keg. But much of the day was relatively quiet. In fact, for the afternoon, the sun was out. But the sun warmed up the air into the 80s, making the air extremely explosive. And by late afternoon and early evening, severe storms did indeed develop, and they developed quickly. Many of those storms went into rapid rotation. That night, a total of 11 tornadoes touched down across Alabama. Some of those were on the ground for an extremely long period of time. One tornado track was 44 miles long, another 72 miles long. And those long-track tornadoes were parallel to one another, within only about 8 to 10 miles. That night, one of the hardest-hit communities was Carbon Hill in Walker County. The actual tornado now is along or just north of Highway 78, just west of Carbon Hill. Just west of Carbon Hill out toward the community of Kansas and Eldridge, and this is going to be moving towards the east-northeast. It's going to be crossing out of Walker County into Winston County. If we can, Mark, let's do about a 15-mile look at this. I want to get the street-level mapping on here. We're going to go down to about 15 miles and show you some of the communities. Okay, this is perfect. Out of Jasper, Alabama Highway 5 runs up through Nauvoo and Lynn. Nauvoo is just across the line. This is my hand is on the line. Down below is Walker, up above is Winston. Nauvoo sits right here in Walker County. Lynn is across the line in Winston County. There's about 12 miles between these two towns. That's your tornado, and that is moving in the general direction of Nauvoo.
Right where you see the cars going there on 78, we continue to sometimes see a lowering of the cloud base. That'd be about where the tornado is right now.
Every tree's down on every single block, and we came running because a house is on fire up here. It's a Bray house, and the firemen are just trying to get through to, it's okay, it's all right. They're trying to get through to get to the fire, and they're saying that some people are trapped in a car up on Widow's Lane, and nobody can get there, and basically we're just all trapped in.
The nightmare started after dark on a hot November night. Tornadoes started dropping out of the sky, leaving behind miles of destruction, leveled homes, a destroyed school, and at least 12 people dead. 4 people are still listed as missing in Walker County, where an F3 tornado hit. A state of emergency has been declared for the areas hit hardest by the series of tornadoes that smashed across our state. Emergency crews are in several counties tonight trying to get relief to the storm victims who've lost so much. ABC 3340's Pam Huff is live again with us with our team coverage of Walker County, where so many people lost their lives during last night's nightmarish storms. Pam?
Linda, it has been a very sad day here today. A lot of people just walking around sort of in shock and very, very stunned about what has happened to this community. A tremendous loss here. As the day has gone on, we have learned more about exactly what happened in Carbon Hill. We can now tell you that there were 2 separate tornadoes on the ground here. One was on the ground for about 15 minutes. The other, the one that hit the school behind me, was on the ground for about a half hour. And of course, as we now know, each of those tornadoes left behind a swath of destruction that claimed lives and property. But you know what? Carbon Hill was not the only part of the city hit. This is what's left of a chicken farm near Jasper. A tornado touched down here as the November nightmare began to unfold. In the town of Arley in Winston County, more destruction, homes thrown into the water. And in Saragossa, a church destroyed. 2 people died here. But in Carbon Hill, the loss of life is overwhelming. 10 dead, 4 missing. From Airlink 3340, it's incredible to see the destruction. Trees look like splinters, houses like piles of blocks, and the town's only remaining school, Carbon Hill Elementary and Middle School, is all but gone. 60 to 70% of the school is no longer usable. School Superintendent Alan Trotter says they hope to find a place to house the 540 students by the end of the week. And certainly we were going to have more on the school coming up in just a moment. But, you know, we should also tell you that those 4 who were missing have now been accounted for. And that was just a little piece of good news today as all of this began to unfold. Ike Pigott has been here with me throughout the day. We want to continue our team coverage now by going to Ike and hearing more about the damage and the damage assessment that he has discovered this day. Ike?
Pam, the big question here was where to begin. For the most part, this was an outside-in operation, like an onion. Emergency and rescue crews had to peel their way in a layer at a time, not entirely sure what they'd find. It was hard to know just how bad the damage was in Carbon Hill. Those waiting until first light had to wait for the fog to burn away. Once it did, you could see the signs of death in the air.
I saw the big funnel. It was real huge up in the clouds, and it came down to a point. I couldn't see for the horizon whether it was down on the ground or not.
3 twisters ripped across north central Alabama. 2 skirted in and around Carbon Hill in Walker County. At least 10 people died amid the widespread damage. Rescue workers kept busy to keep that count from rising.
Getting our streets cleaned up right now so we can go house to house, make sure that we don't have anybody hurt that we don't know about.
Within the heart of Carbon Hill, you couldn't go very far without tripping across a power line. Yet hundreds of residents did. A parade of souls, not celebrating Veterans Day, but enduring it. The people with the most difficult job work for the Walker County coroner. They have the names of several of the victims of this storm, but they can't release those names because with all the phone outages, they can't notify next of kin. Pam?
Thank you, Ike. And certainly one of the other groups that had one of the most difficult jobs around here had to take place last night, and that's when all of those people who were injured and many of the victims had to be taken to Walker Baptist Medical Center. How do you begin to staff up for such an emergency? How do you begin to handle the number of people coming in? Let's continue our team coverage now. ABC 3340's Valorie Carter joins me with more on that. Val?
Well, the Walker Baptist Medical Center started seeing patients around 7:30 last night. The last patient came in around 4 o'clock this morning. 6 people had to be admitted. 4 were transported to Birmingham. Most of those injuries were coming from the Carbon Hill area, Arley and Nauvoo. Last night, Walker Baptist Medical treated at least 50 patients with injuries ranging from lacerations to serious head injuries. We are told the waiting room was packed, and the patients range in ages from 4-year-old twins to adults. Doctors and nurses were working some very long hours last night. In fact, some people off duty who heard about the deadly storms reported to work at the hospital.
We had physicians in the area that volunteered to come in. So we had an abundance of physicians. We had several nurses. We had help from all the other departments in the hospital. They sent aid up to the emergency center.
There are a few people who remain in the hospital tonight, but not to say that others won't be coming in over the next couple of days because it is still very dangerous out there. We had a report of a woman who was not involved in the tornado, but she heard about the tornado, went to her mobile home and found that it was destroyed, tried to get some things, and she cut her foot and she had to go to the hospital. So it is still very dangerous out there. So they're hoping not to get any more patients, but again, there is that possibility. Pam?
Val, and of course there is so much to clean up around here that this is going to go on for days and weeks from now, and so as Valorie said, it is still a very dangerous scene throughout Carbon Hill and this area. Of course, this was not the only part of the state that was affected by last night's terrible weather. Let's go to Chris Tatum now in our East Alabama newsroom, and we know, Chris, that there was an individual over there who did not make it through.
Well, that's right, Pam, and people all day have told me that by the time they learned a tornado was moving into their area in Cherokee County, that it was already ripping through their neighborhood. Plus, they say a nearby tornado siren never sounded. Now, a lot of them differ on how to broach that concern with emergency management officials, but they all agree, as bad as this damage is, it could have been much worse.
It come through the gate and then come here.
People who live along Cherokee County Road 16 knew things were bad when a tornado touched down in the Alexis community early Monday morning. Sunrise showed just how bad. Toppled trees, ripped off roofs, whole houses snatched off their foundations. Many trees fell on houses. Emergency management officials estimate the tornado tore a 6-mile path through eastern Cherokee County. This pile of rubble used to be a mobile home. It's hard to imagine anyone digging his way out of this mess.
Yeah, this guy went hit.
I mean, it didn't seem like it was 2 or 3 seconds and it done all this damage.
Billy Lloyd doubts his neighbors would have lived to tell about this tornado if they hadn't hunkered down in this storm shelter. He recalls they'd no sooner closed the door when they heard the twister touch down. Lloyd was stunned when he stepped out of the storm shelter. His neighbors' homes were torn to pieces, especially the mobile home his daughter lived in. He's just thankful she wasn't at home.
She wouldn't be here. It's just like the lady next door. I mean, there's no way, I don't believe nobody could survive that.
And that man there in our story, Billy Lloyd, tells me he's certain it was that storm shelter that saved his life and the lives of several of his neighbors. And Pam, it just goes to prove what I've heard James Spann say time and time again. Don't wait until a severe weather situation to put your safety plan in place.
Absolutely. Chris Tatum, we thank you very much. Speaking of James Spann, ABC 3340's chief meteorologist, joins us now live here in Carbon Hill this afternoon. James, of course, you spent all last night at the station working through this. I know that today you have been out here and you've had the opportunity to survey some of the damage yourself and also to talk with Brian Peters of the National Weather Service.
Yes, Pam, I have spent a pretty good bit of the afternoon just doing some simple damage assessment here. In Carbon Hill, we've got some roofs taken off structures, off homes and schools. In fact, the school behind me here. And anytime a roof is taken off a structure, automatically that makes the tornado an F2. But you really don't know exactly the scope of the tornado damage path until you get up in the air. Of course, we've done that with Airlink 3340 today. And Brian Peters of the National Weather Service, who ultimately ranks these on the Fujita scale, went up in a helicopter, and this is what he told me his final assessment would be.
The one that hit Carbon Hill only is the only one we've had an opportunity to do the entire track. And basically, while the intensity varied a lot along the track, we found areas of F3 damage, so it'll go in the record books as F3. What I think makes this one an extremely interesting tornado is the length of the path. I haven't had a chance to get down with a GPS unit and my mapping software and give you an actual A to Z track length, but it's looking like on the order of 50 or 60 miles.